hello everybody from my side as well. Thank you for joining our end of the year Real Talk session on focus and formats of the SNRD Africa. My name is Caroline and I'm the community manager of the network. Our Real Talk is our space to look honestly at how we communicate and how small shifts can create more value for our readers and listeners and our members. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Pascal Corbet, our external consultant on communications to you, who has long experiences in communications and has been working on rural development topics in Africa over 25 years now, Pascal, and even longer in communications. So yeah, as I said, without further ado, let me hand over to Pascal.
Yeah, thanks for the nice quick intro. Don't want to spend too much time on housekeeping in a way. This is basically what I've been thinking would be a good idea to talk about: the frame, value add and content, a little bit about headlines, and then the actual theme, if you want, focus and format, and then obviously discuss this. I didn't put numbers before this, so 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not necessarily in that order, and I want to encourage everyone to basically jump in and ask anytime. So the idea, I guess, of the sort of real talk frame is actually very simple: to look honestly at how we communicate and ask whether it really creates value, what we're doing for the people out there on the receiving end. I guess here now in development cooperation, we're specifically good at doing things, obviously, especially in SNRD, clearly. And we're also good at talking about what we do. But what does a particular piece of content actually do for the reader? That is the core question here today. So we need to shift our focus on the reader. What value does our content add for the reader? And how do we design it so people can actually, that we have people actually wanting to consume it, read it? So I want to keep this short and practical. You should be walking away in the end with a clear way to think about what is focus and format. You should get a better sense of why classic success stories are a bit limited, and a couple of concrete ideas for your next SNRD article or blog post or video or article that you produce somewhere else. So when we get to the next point now, it's important that this is not any sort of quality judgment call. It's just supposed to be a tool to make basic decisions on communications aspects easier for you. So let's start with a distinction we probably all felt at some point, which is at the center of many communications pieces and their performance. There are two different value adds in our realm: the value add of the project, what the project contributes on the ground, politically, technically, basically all these goals that are in the project papers, where it's supposed to go at, and so forth. And then we have the value add of the content. The content means what a specific article, video, or post does for a reader, let's say in 5 to 10 minutes of their time. The issue is now that in our internal logic, those two value adds get merged and conflated quite often. So it's sort of the logic is our project is important, and it does this and that, and therefore the story about our project is also important and adds value. Yeah. The issue is that our readers, any readers, even the ones that are sort of maybe very close to us, don't really think like that practically when they are on the internet, let's say, consuming any kind of information. We all know it's a very information abundant environment. So when you're on a website, in a newsletter, scrolling through LinkedIn, your brain, just like theirs, is just running on this sort of filter. Does this help me now with anything concrete that I'm dealing with? And I guess in the SNRD context, GIZ context, that usually means I'm at in a work scenario, even if I'm sort of at home, maybe, I'm looking for a work problem to be solved, or a policy puzzle, or something that I have, or just a very practical question. I'm not really looking for being entertained, and also not really what is interesting. Interested, we're all running basically this filter. I hope I'm not going to see anything interesting that I might be tempted to look at. I actually want to get ahead. So it's a bit of a ridiculous situation, I think, that we all feel. So the real question is, obviously, if someone spends 5 minutes with this piece, how are they better off in a way afterwards? What can they do, understand better, decide more clearly on? That's sort of I guess, the idea that we're trying to look for. So maybe keep that at the back of your mind for the rest of the session. And if you like, you can drop one word into the chat. What kind of problems do you really usually look for help for when you're on the internet, and especially when you read SNRD content of others? What kind of problems is there? Anything you can. So let's just look quickly at something that we introduced some time ago. That's the flip box. I'm not really attempting here to show how it flips on the website, because that usually doesn't work so well with these presentations. So I've picked one out here, one article. If you hover over this, it turns. And the idea for introducing this was to make people think more of the value add that the piece of information has. And for the reader, when they actually do this flipping over onto the other side, they get spelled out directly what is in for them to take away. That's why it's called the takeaway. Yeah, what is in there for them. So ideally, you focus when you construct the article. You focus on that. What happens, obviously, quite often is that they think of this once they've submitted the article, or they read that they should fill this box in, and then they're not really constructing the article with that. And as you can see here, if you look at the value add here that was done for this article, the sentences start with see how, stories about, discover. And if you really think about that, the way it's phrased, it's not really exactly that well-defined takeaways for specific target groups and so forth. It's not, the post might be descriptive and full of data, well written and interesting. Yeah, but remember, there's a lot of interesting stuff. So it doesn't really say, I'm telling you about how this and this or is done, or something like that, or I give you exact blueprint for a procedure, how to come about in a policy process. Yeah, and that is very common, and I can totally understand that why this is happening. So let me show you briefly. I've been working with the KCOA for, I don't know, 2 years now. I should quickly show you what that blog looks like now, after we've been working on that with the editors network there, and what happened to their thinking. You can go to that website yourself. It's not so easy here to go through the content. One thing they learned there very quickly was that when you start from a mindset of reporting on your project, it becomes almost impossible to shift fully towards that creating value for the reader as such. You can't really come to the table, to your desk with the idea, I talk about my project, and then change it to something that is very specifically focused on the reader. Yeah. You always end up describing the importance of the project, and you don't really speak to the people and invite conversation, what they're actually looking for. So with KCOA, we built what we called then a knowledge promotion team, essentially an editorial team, where we wrote the TOR, and then they focused more on value add of each content piece. And here's what you see the result: why organic farming is a game changer, and so forth. go on the website, look for yourself. The articles, they are abundant now, and a lot of them are now having questions like how to do this and that, and the information about the project, the initiative, or what's describing is built into it. So they have created shorter, more useful problem-solving pieces in parts that people actually really want to read. And the view numbers went up into the thousands of some of these pieces. So obviously, the point there is as well that the editors are editors. They're not writing all the pieces themselves. They are sometimes only editing them. So they do both writing and editing. So it is also difficult for them to restructure articles that in a way that was originally demanded. So that was actually what this whole thing started out was calling this blog success stories. That's another format that people use, which is very much liked in development cooperation, is the idea that you look at something that works well, then you sell it as a success, which is a bit of a maybe overstatement sometimes, but that's not really the issue. The issue is, and that we carved out in that process very well, is that when you take out individual stories, first of all, the names, that you always talk about that person, that becomes very interchangeable, very quick. And also the story then tends to look at personal indicators, and it carries often not enough information that makes the processes behind that success story amiable or that you can replicate that in another project. And also the strategy there was to carry knowledge across. The KCOA had been working on creating so-called knowledge pieces, knowledge papers, over 1,000 in a database. And that needs to be promoted now in their third phase or whatever. So the idea here was to create articles that carry that information, use the stories, and build into it at the end a download button with a little intro, how to do soil treatment, or how to get rid of fall army worms, this sort of thing, and then you could download that knowledge piece. So the strategic aim was to have this currency knowledge that needs to get into circulation, not really the view numbers. So if you focus on that something looks nice, you get view numbers. But the question is, if you had to sell the whole thing as a product, if you were in corporate communications, then you wouldn't get that conversion, actually, that people actually buy the stuff in the end. They come to the website, look at it, but they don't really buy. So, as I said, this was quite an interesting thing. And what I had done there, as well as I introduced something that I've been talking about, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago in this format here with SNRD as well, Real Talk format. It was the 52 headline hacks. Here's the slide that I used at the time. It's by a former editor called Jim Morrow. And it's a document. I can circulate that later on, also a website. And what is done there is he has created the idea that certain headlines create more traction in that sense. What we're talking about here, getting people to wanting to enter. Click on it and enter the actual articles. And he has here you can see 6 different types that he has created. You can, I guess it's pretty much self-explanatory. And I'm going to go into the next slide. It's a small technique where I picked out the one with the how-to headlines. And that there you can see it's a whole different kind of way wanting people to enter and read more. So on the right, there are the how-to headlines. You can fill in the blanks. And there's something that KCO did now quite a lot. They used how-to headlines quite a lot. And I find them very useful for our purposes. So don't want to go into detail this because we covered it before. And so the recording of that session is also on our YouTube channel. Just want to say one thing about this. As you can see now, if you look at these headlines, you have to choose one of those headlines before you start writing. Obviously, you can't say, I'm going to give you 6 tips on this and that, or how to do this and that, and then put in the information about your project sort of interspersed into it or at the bottom or whatever. Because you need to obviously reflect that structure of the 6 tips, and what you've done then before is probably not going to work that well. So you might have to redo the whole thing. You can maybe use AI, ChatGPT, or whatever else to help you doing that, but that's a risky thing. You need to make sure that it doesn't get all these AI problems. So, but also from the mindset, if you think of something of these headlines, if you go through the document, these different kinds, maybe one is quite useful for you, and you can think of a way to actually restructure the whole thing. Now, what we used with another a project at some time ago, a global project with the soil a global project at the time, was this content fuel framework by Melanie Diziel. And this is now the actual part for today. She made the distinction between focus and format. And I think what's important is that you're not really stuck on the idea what the word focus means for you usually. Yeah. The focus is the angle, what exactly we are looking at. A person, a process, data, a data-based thing, before and after situation where you sort of frame then around specific example that you want to delve into, or the basics of a topic, I don't know, pest control or whatever, yeah. And the format then is the shape the article comes in. So it's a regular article, a video, infographic, an image gallery, a fact sheet, a podcast, a quiz. So that's sort of for us, you could say the format here is the container the content comes in. So the content idea is basically both. It's 2 ideas basically in one: focus and format. And obviously, the formats as they're described here, that is very basic, writing and so forth. That obviously there's many different ways of writing, so it's obviously that can be specified much more still. Yeah, so here is a little summary. So if you want to go through this later, that's put this onto a slide, what I just said. One observation here. Most creators, like us, we all creators, start by choosing the format. Yeah, that's also my experience with many of the meetings we have. Is somebody says, let's do a video, let's do a success story, or we need a flyer and so forth. And then we talk about what actually goes in there, basically information about the project, and then become a bit more specific on this. Yeah. What Melanie Diziel says in her book about this is that if you really think about it, when we start by choosing a format, we assume that how we say something, the format, is more important than what we say. And that's obviously not true. Yeah. So we should actually think of what we want to say and then choose the format that's most appropriate for a number of reasons, for the content itself, the target group, and so forth. So we should be clear about what we want to get across and to whom, for what exact purposes. And usually it's also a good idea to have a call to action that specifies what exactly you want the reader to do next, what exactly, to take away. That's a very good idea to work towards that in a way. Yeah, so thinking of a CTA, call to action, early on keeps you very focused in that sense. Remember that visibility as such, that's on many papers, it's not really worth much. You need to think about what you need to convince people of or what you want them to do with that. So if they just go away and said that was interesting and don't do anything, their awareness about your project is not gonna convert into something that you that you want to do. So just being interesting in that sense is not going to crack it. So I just put it like that quite often, is if you are now on a Christmas market and you go to one of those stalls there where they have clothing, and everybody is coming there and says how nice the stuff is that they have, and they're commending you on your great woolly socks. But they're not buying anything. It's something that we can see quite often now. People have so much, they only consume food and drinks. So that is not going to crack it for you. People are totally aware and even have a conversation with you, but they don't buy anything. They're not taking anything home. So I know it's a very high bar, but that's the ideal case, that you construct your content in a way that has something to take away and that makes them come back. So let's just quickly go into the different types here. That's also more something that I've created here for you to take away when you have the PowerPoint in your hand later on. It's some of these examples that were mentioned, spelled out basically on the different focus types. So there's obviously here a people-centered article, also known as a feature or a profile. So you pick out a person and you focus on that maybe well-known figure in whatever in that field that you're working with. There's quite often some people that are known, usually older colleagues that know quite a lot about certain things. Norman Borlaug, or what, the Green Revolution, or maybe even something around your project, somebody who's been engaged in that country for quite some time. And then you take that and you feature that person basically, and then whatever else you have to say, you intersperse into the whole story, or just put it at the bottom. Ideally, you would focus um, on that person. So don't front load your project information. Keep it quiet on that. Don't start in the project spelled out, parentheses with the acronym, and then together with the federal ministry, la la la, BMZ, so and so, and then start with this story and put the information on who's behind that at the back, just like as if you would talk to someone, you would do when you're on a work function. You would also not talk like that. So here's an example for you to also look at then later on. Yeah, local agri blogger, so and so forth. You can look through this. I'm going to go through the different. There's another example for you to then look at. A well-known large-scale farmer in a region is about to turn 90. There will be a lot of media attention because she's also a personality known for her outspoken engagement. So that would be a great way to start a story around this. Okay, I have two computers here at the same, and the third example. Yeah, and then here's another thing about basics, a story that focuses on basics, also known as general overview articles, a little description on what that actually is, and an example. long form website article or social media video with someone explaining the three things you need to know about this and that. Yeah, and then you would go into the basics. Details focused article would be also known as a deep dive. So you do basically a similar thing to the basics, but you dive deeply into one. So you can have a headline would start the expert's guide to XYZ, everything you need to know about this and that. So the objective there would be, for example, to be a one-stop shop on this specific relevant subject. Yeah. History, a history article, let's say you have so a certain period of time that you've been working on something, and there's a whole history, and you can dig into how the whole thing started. Yeah. So you could help maybe your partner organization to set up a history tab on their website, showing the complete evolution of the work achieved and so forth. And obviously, you can also hook this into SNRD, creating an article that points at this tab, for example. Yeah, processes, also known as a run sheet. So here's the focus on showing the target group how something happens, and sometimes help them replicate that process themselves. So it's more an instructional thing usually. Let me just look at this. Yeah. I'm going through these different products. It's about raw research. Yeah. So I don't want to go into all this. I think you get the idea. Yeah. So data focus, whenever you have a whole bunch of data, sort of not really information, more data. Example for that opinion piece, obviously, is also quite something that we're not having so often. Something that I haven't mentioned here, which is not maybe a focus type in itself, but humor is actually something that is quite often not often used in our context, which works actually very well if you create something that you could build it into an opinion piece where people, use humor in a way. That is something that is probably totally underutilized in our context. And here you have now, again, the overview, what we covered. And you can see here there's sort of, you can have a focus. You think you cover something on a process. You have a nice process, how a policy maybe came into being. So you structure your article by looking at the different processes. You think of something first, how you can tease this with your headline, and then you choose the format of an image gallery with captions. Obviously, they need to be a little bit more elaborate, and then you can also post this also obviously from there onto your social media and so forth. And now, as an overview, what you can see, which is also here from the book, Melanie Desiel's Content Fuel Framework, you can use this chart and think of, where you actually, what you actually want to focus on, and then pick a format, and put a cross here, and then it's just for you to help that you have so many different options. You can use this even in little workshops when you talk about how you want to create content with your sub task force on that. And obviously, not all of these things make always sense. You might tend to use certain things, and obviously, you can expand this. Video is a very broad notion. You can obviously have TikTok, and within TikTok is only a channel. There's different ways of you present something in video. So this is not a conclusive chart in a way, both here on the left side, on the column side, and into the other direction. Yeah, you can do a whole lot of different things. And if you want to use the presentation, let's go on further. There's a Kanban sheet where you can basically, if you want to use this, you can. Oh, oh no, we went out of the presentation mode. I did the mistake. This is in presentation mode, obviously. You can use these themes, and you can create the descriptions here, and you can move them around here as a Kanban sheet, or you can do this as a what do you call it, a clipboard thing with moderation cards, and you can start discussing how you want to create the different formats. And that's basically it. Over to you, Caro, Heike.
To everybody, are there any questions, directly reactions on what Pascal has just explained to us?
There's something by Nastaran, a question about, is this a listicle or a normal article with this headline? I obviously didn't follow the chat while I was presenting. So Nasran, maybe you can come on. I don't know at what time you were asking the question, so I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to.
Hi, Pascal. Now you see my horrible kitchen. The whole world sees it. Okay. I was asking about the how-to headlines.
Yeah.
I was wondering what the article would look like, but I think you already answered that.
Yeah. So the second chart, you can see a lot of different how-to suggestions, and I suppose you can then think of how you want to then answer that question that you put up there. A listicle could be something, a process-related story. A process can also be form of a listicle if you structure it into steps, sort of a historical thing. Even though sometimes historical things are not really always so useful, right? But if you have a technical process, you would obviously go by step. That's the natural way. But you could also highlight certain aspects to consider how to, especially sort of when you prepare a policy process, you could think of how we did a stakeholder mapping the other way. We did an interest mapping because we figured out that it's actually not so useful to put names on there or groups of people that doesn't, like, I don't know, like policymakers, which we found actually difficult to identify who that actually is. We were very quickly with naming the group, but it doesn't really exist. So we did an interest mapping, and then you can structure the article more around that in terms of a policy process genesis in a way, maybe.
But in this case, and in a lot of other cases that you mentioned in it that I also saw, and is you always have like something surprising. And this, for example, your example was a surprising or something you did different, a new perspective. And this is the content that I think is working, not so much the headline.
Yeah, well, the thing is that I think what you need to remember is that what people do see is the headline. Yeah. If you do an all-encompassing headline, just nouns, typical German or French way of doing it as a nominal construction. Yeah. And then if we're doing better, we're using English and we're using a gerund, a gerundium, you're strengthening, opening, rethinking, which is actually a verb put into a noun. These are not very enticing to make people click. And what we forget is when we look into the article, how it's structured and this and that, and somebody even fiddles around with the commas or semicolons and have discussions on that. If we don't get people to enter the article, we have nothing. So an all-encompassing headline that sort of captures everything, like like you would do when you write a thesis or something, that is not the point. You rather pick one point that is interesting, and you should, because you need to get people to jump into the article. There's an exercise where they say, they do with journalists. So you have a situation to the team. You say, on Friday, today's Friday, on Monday, there will be the Minister of Culture coming to the school, and there's going to be a meeting, and there's going to be a gathering there, and they're going to be talking about this. They're using the opportunity to also look at get in contact with the teachers and the kids, and maybe some parents should also come, would be great, so this sort of happening. So now you get all this information via the press release, and you as a journalist should write an article. And obviously you want people to read the article. What would be the headline? No, son, any suggestion? Or anyone, obviously. What would be a good headline? Okay, I don't want to put anyone on the spot here. Anyway, so the instructor goes through the typical headlines that come then, something about the policies or the ministers coming. And what he suggests then in the end is no school on Monday. Or, no curriculum. I don't know, how in English it's not, you cannot really say kein Unterricht, so there's not something like that. And so no school on Monday. Well, and then obviously in the sub-headline, there's qualified why there's no school. It's actually kids need to come to school, but they're going to be listening for 2 hours to this guy talking there. But the idea is, classic, let's put it into a classic scenario, newspaper. It appeals to the dad. Let's be a bit, not so gender thingy here, but the dad classic thing is, why is my kid not going to school on Monday? The caretaker, the mom maybe, or someone thinks, no, they're not going to school. I need to read this. Why is this? And do I need to arrange for someone to, take care of them, and so forth? So they have a whole lot of reasons why people start reading the article. So in the first sentences, you get the opportunity to clarify that it's not just stupid clickbait, but what you talk about is actually relevant, and it's not really. But I think that shows that it does take a little bit of creativity, but it also takes what everybody talks about, empathy, about what the other one is really interested in. Empathy is about looking into how the other one is situated, but also how am I coming across towards them. And I think you just need to take the time for that, to think of that. You can always tweak the headline a little bit around. If you decided to do a how-to headline in a certain way, and you've created the article, then you might think, okay, I don't have 9 points why this is important. Obviously, it's easy to make 7 out of it. By the way, uneven numbers work best for some psychological reason. And you can also tweak the whole thing a little bit, but it's easier when you started with this and then change the headline, as if you sort of just make a description of your project, starting with the background and then coming to the conclusion. You'll not get it into another direction then easily. Follow-on question, Nasran?
Oh, but I think you mentioned time, and this is something that really, for creativity, is needed. And I don't know how the others feel, but for me, time is the most difficult issue, the resource that I don't have.
Yeah, that is clear. On the other hand, it's always, I guess, a question of how many products or articles, whatever it is, depends on your responsibility, how much you're into communication, how much time you actually spend on that, and how much effect you get of it, how much, bang for the buck. The buck here is probably the time paid for. So maybe one good article in one quarter for your project, maybe not for SNRD, that would do much more than having, I don't know, 10 briefings that you create because you have not that much time. It's a decision, obviously. Caro or any other one wants to come in on this?
So anybody else has a question? If not, I also have one, Pascal, for you. Right. I don't see anybody. So let me come in first. Knowing the SNRD Africa network for quite a while now, Pascal, and think of new combinations on focus and formats, what do you suggest the SNRD Africa network to do more? Because from what I see, we're mostly focusing ourselves on articles here. So yeah, maybe you have a group on that.
Yeah. We're focusing on articles, yes, because we're on the website. But obviously, I think what was clear now that the article in itself is something that can be expanded into very different directions, sort of horizontally in different focuses and formats. The other way would be to think would maybe vertically, time-wise. Don't think of the article as the beginning and the end. You can also create outreach from that, let's say via LinkedIn. And that could also entail how you consider not just taking the link and put it into LinkedIn and then basically giving 2, 3 words about the article, but you can also think of how you can actually build this up and send this around in different ways to specific people, inviting them and so forth, or inviting comments on this. So there's that sort of if you think of downstream a little bit, you can do different things with it. What I think would also be obviously quite nice if we had video more. There's a tool that I could show that's called Promo. It's sort of a video creation tool, which basically helps you put together what you also can do on CapCut and so forth, is basically considering what kind of visual you have with what kind of text underneath or words said. And you can construct little small videos, also very focused on specific issues. And I think that will be something to consider. But many people have on their cell phones CapCut now, and we could create something. And I think in terms of this sort of focus and format, you can. I think what is important there is that you don't wait for like 3, 4 months, and then you have so much to talk about. You should fire this off and be on specific more tiny issues, and the whole glue that holds everything together comes through your following by listening to you over a certain period of time. So you don't attempt to try to capture the whole project anyway. That's not really that interesting as such quite often, but try to capture certain aspects, how something was done. And, so I would say that is the typical social media type video, which we could also use on the website, by the way. Obviously, you've all seen it now. You could put a player into the article. That would be maybe one thing. I mean, there's abundant ideas that you can have around certain things. That's even fact sheets could be made in a different way than what we have right now.
Yeah.
Anyway,
thanks. Worthwhile thinking about that in depth, I guess, and be creative here, as you said.
And maybe
Are
one
there
thing.
any further questions?
I just have one more idea that popped into my mind. I think what is very interesting about video is that obviously you stand there as a person, so people expect that you put what you talk about into a certain value. So you're not that sort of distant critical. So people know that you're actually talking about a little bit about something from your personal, professional perspective, and I think that makes this, especially in this time and age, valuable for people, because there's so many officialish declarations out there. So if you talk about something and give it a little bit of an opinion touch in a broader sense of perspective, put it that way, that's what people like, and that's why they go for it. They want to hear that, and that would, I think, would add a lot. So yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Are there any further questions?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the presentation. It's maybe not that much of a question, but I tried to summarize for myself what that means, some main messages, what you said. It was quite a lot. I'm not in communications, but it would be great if you could help me again, like to check and summarize some main points missing. So the one thing I understood was be clear on your main message that you want to put across, because often we have, we want to put it all because there's so much we have to tell. I think that's a common, what I understood from you, that's a common mistake. So this, be clear about your main message beforehand and stick to it, would be one. The second is the target group focus. So know your target group to be able to be target group specific. You can't produce a piece of knowledge, an article that is attractive to everyone, but to need to be specific on your target group. And then the next, and we have touched upon that, is the form follows function that you, I think, put across. You don't choose first how you want to put it, but first you determine the what and for whom, and then decide on the form. And the fourth one was the catchy titles, this clickbait example that you brought. And I think here the no school works for probably everyone, but on other topics, you probably need to be specific. For one target group, something else works, and for another target group, a different thing. So this is the 4 nutshell takeaways I took, but maybe if you could put, if something major is missing as a takeaway, if you could put that into a few sentences, that would be great. As a, yeah, it's like I'm trying to shell out the key takes for myself. So yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah, obviously me doing the presentation, I would obviously say you can't put this into 2 minutes, because otherwise I would have been talking too much. I think with many of these things, the important part is what you say first. And what you said first, so the order here, what you presented here as a summary, the first one, be clear on your messaging. That is true. That's where we're coming from. That's what we hear. We need to get our message across, our core content. But I think what you need to, once you have done that, you should take one step back, and you want to know what people are actually wanting to hear. And if you don't do that, then you behave like someone who is entering a social function, for your work. You imagine like a social media situation now in real social. You go onto a social function, you grab your champagne glass, you walk around, and then you stand in the middle and you start talking about yourself and your messages, Or you enter each conversation with what you want to say. That's the risk. And that's basically what we do. We present something and we wait for people to listen to us. That is, so the idea is still, obviously, that's what you sort of feel that you paid for to get across your messages. But if you think of a social interaction, and not only social media is like that, any media in a way, you need to think of what people want to hear. So ideally, you would ask them, what they want to talk about. You would listen first, and then you would obviously, if you have your messages, you would try to phrase what you want to get across carefully into your answers, whatever they say. That's what politicians do. The journalists ask something, and they always get to the point what they want to talk about, no matter what they ask. Yeah, it's an extreme form. So I think that's the part where the headlines work well, because what the marketing people would say, look at the pain points. What are the pain points of people? And then talk about the pain points, talk about the problems. And don't, if family goes into a mattress warehouse, Nakumat or what, in Nairobi, and wants to have a mattress. So the salesperson talks about, so what is your problem? And this and that. I have a back pain. So he says, well, this mattress is great. And then I have also, my husband has this thing in the neck, this mattress. The salesperson always goes back to, what is the problem? So that would be good for this. That would be good for that. That would be good for this. What he doesn't do, or she, is to take the one pain and then run away with that and just talking about the virtues of the mattress for on and on and on. Talks about it a little bit, solves the problem, restates the problem to emphasize the sort of situation, dramatize it even, then talks about the solution, and then throws the ball back to them and say, well, what else, what other problem do you have in a way? So, and I think what this should show is that it's, while we're all driven by what we want to say, the best conversation talks about the problems and keeps on coming back to the problems, to the pain points of people. Yeah. And obviously not much of the factual information has this capacity to qualify as a pain point discussion, but still the mindset should be into that direction. Yeah. And that's why I said when you put the summary together, there's obviously a lot you could say about the different points, but that you start with, we want to message, that is sort of, yeah, that's your egocentric position, which is clear, but you need to at least try to not let it come across like that.
All right. Thank you for summarizing once again, Pascal. I think we're coming also to an end of the session. So thank you very much for taking your time today, even though we're all facing the end of the year stress right now. And we wish you a Merry Christmas and a great start to 2026. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Pascal.